our roads need improving. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with that number. I guess what's everybody else's thoughts? Any comments?
Oh, the gravel that they're looking at for Gates and Barrage, do we have a say in what kind of gravel we get? Because when they did their last gravel, and when they've done Elmy Road, the gravel is so bad, it's just like slime when it rains. And I've had a lot of complaints about it, so do we have a say in the kind of gravel that we get, or where we get our gravel from? Do you know?
I think they bid that out.
They bid it out when we asked them before, Mark, and I've had complaints too, like Joyce has, and I call them back and say, it's bad now, but if they don't get it that wet and sticky, then it won't last as long in the future down. That's what Mark keeps telling me back, 'cause I know exactly, as soon as it rains, it just,
I'm gonna say, but
yeah, you
Elmy's
can't
been
carry
gravel
that
for how long, and
Yes.
it's still a muddy mess when you go, I mean,
And they're making
I have
that,
4-wheel drive and I slide off the road.
yeah, they're
just
making that
about.
limestone road. No, they've done that, but they're gonna be,
Oh, in the future.
well, they're starting in Belvedere working back, but Elmy's gonna be limestone the whole way, you know, eventually, not this year, but
We normally had budgeted 60,000 for road repair, and it looks like we went to 188.
Yeah, so the,
Or 180.
yeah, so
That was the budget.
that was what we paid, was 180, and we had to do, I think we did a budget amendment
Oh, okay.
to up that because the previous board had signed all the contracts in May. But yes, it was 60 before then.
Right. And we have the, drains and chloride contract separately already.
Yep, this would just be for road work, as far as the chloride's already done, so this would be on
Right.
top of that, yes.
But what I'm saying is, you know, this culvert is part of the drain, and we have a line item for drains specifically.
Oh, okay.
Is it
Well,
drains or drains at large?
I think drains, because we've had replaced culverts in the past, like Payroll.
okay. So we still would have to approve the contract, you're
Oh,
just
yeah.
saying it would
Yeah,
go to the drain
wouldn't
line
all- Yeah, it
item?
wouldn't all be roads
Okay, I think we gotta vote on these,
separately.
separately. So now the brush spray, that would go in roads though, right?
We have a separate line item for that too, unless we moved it.
I don't think I've seen that one, I've seen the chloride, the drains, and the roads. So,
Under the-
but we can,
Well,
while we're at
I'm
it,
gonna do them individually.
yeah, one question,
they're
just
good,
to,
like a Joyce.
to follow up on this, and we can talk to Mark and just kind of express the concern and see, you know, I know he does his best and they try to get the best price and try to weigh it all, but maybe there's, you know, something that could be done, or I don't know, but I
Well, I'm
definitely.
just thinking of Barrage Road with those potato trucks and stuff that go down that road. If that becomes a mess down there, you know,
And they're supposed to be getting with Belvedere to do from Lake Road to Ferris, you know, to finish that portion, but, and there's a lot of traffic that goes down, there's a lot of traffic, you know that
Yeah.
comes there and makes, there's a bad bump east of that intersection there, you know, we could.
Yeah.
Did Mark say he switched
Hey,
gravel?
don't, hey, please, we're not talking right now. See, I lost my train of thought now.
Well, we were gonna vote on each of these
Yeah,
individually.
I mean, I think we could approve the gravel, and then I'll relay that concern to him, just so, you know, we've at least expressed it,
So I
and
think it's
see what.
different between processed and just pit and gravel, round versus cut stone, where a lot of it was. I know Jordan had requested it before. Okay.
Alright, are you gonna
I'll make
start
a
them off?
motion with Saturday paving
wait,
project.
oh, you're gonna go off this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be easier. I make a motion that we approve the $64,399 contract with the County Road Commission for Saturday.
I will support that. And in discussion, I will just note that, you know, the contract will show $84,399. But I did confirm with Mark that the $20,000 will be applied to that, so I just wanna make that note. Okay, any further discussion on this one? Okay, we'll do roll call. Bernwald,
Yes.
Clark Hubbard, yes. Lincoln,
Yes.
Reeser,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Next.
I will make a motion that we go ahead and gravel Gates and Barrage contracting with the county for $22,830.
And I will support that, and, just note that we will get a zero invoice for Barrage. Further discussion on that? Hearing none, roll call, Myers,
Yes.
Reeser. Yes. Lincoln,
Yes.
Clark Hubbard, yes, Burnwell,
Yes.
motion passed.
Moving right along, there's two seal coat projects for Youngman Road and Lake Shore. I'll make the motion that we enter into contract with the road commission on those two for $20,842.
There's support on that? Support. Motion's been made and supported on,
Was it David or?
It doesn't matter, either one.
kind of beat him. Motion's been made and supported to approve Youngman and Lake Shore Drive seal coat projects. Further discussion? Hearing none, Myers,
Yes.
Reeser.
Yes.
Lincoln,
Yes.
Clark Hubbard, yes, Burnwell,
Yes.
motion passed. And probably, wanna break those up,
Yeah.
brush spray first.
I'll make a motion to enter into contract with the county road commission for brush spray for $2,000.
Is there support on that?
Support.
Motion's been made and supported, for the brush spray contract for $2,000. Further discussion? Hearing none. Burnwell,
Yes.
Clark Hubbard, yes, Lincoln,
Yes.
Reeser.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
And lastly, the culvert.
Culvert replacement, I make the motion, we enter into contract with the county for $4,900.
No, 29,
I'm sorry,
cause they split it,
Yeah,
40.
we broke it.
29 just for the tube.
oh, sorry,
That's right.
29 is a correction.
Is there support on that? Support, okay. Motion has been made and supported for the culvert replacement on Tamarack Road for $2,900. Further discussion? Hearing none, Burnwell,
Yes.
Clark Hubbard, yes, Lincoln,
Yes.
Reeser.
Yes.
Myers, yes.
Yes.
Alright, motion passed. So we got our roads, and we'll have to sign
I got them right here.
before,
Yeah.
I guess before we leave, we'll do that. to keep
Yep,
it
I just
rolling.
wanna sort out Tamarack Road and get that out of there, so we will sign it and send it
Yeah,
over.
I'm gonna set mine out here too, so I don't forget. Alright, that's roads. Alright, one more thing. That moves us along to, our QuickBooks consulting line item, and we have, guest Blaine Gebhardt, who is the owner of Trusted Solutions, accounting service, and, Blaine, at our last meeting, we had approved her to take a look at our, QuickBooks file, and also help, correct some payroll errors, and she is here to, provide her report of findings, and also, present a proposal for future services. I'll let Blaine have the floor.
So, you guys had noticed that there were some checks missing from a January payroll, which was the original request, and so those were in fact missing. And then there were vendor checks that had been written in place of, which just means outside of the payroll system.
Can you kind of just explain how that, you think that happened? Cause I know we had our, kind of some computer transfers and.
Yeah, so my best guess of how that happened is that you guys had been working on an old computer, and you had a new computer, you transitioned the software to the new computer, and when the file was uploaded to the new computer, there was still work that had been done after the fact in the old computer, and so that file didn't get put up to date, and then the new file started being used. So the work that had been done between uploading the file to the new computer and actually starting to use the new computer was not there in the new computer. So then when discovering that it wasn't there, I would guess that possibly it was during reconciliations. Instead of rerunning that payroll, checks were just input into the system for the net amount of the checks, so that those would then be there to show in the check register that then would reconcile with the bank
As vendor checks.
as vendor checks. So,
Okay.
and what that means, just so for clarification, a vendor check is just outside of the QuickBooks payroll system.
Okay.
So that'd be my best guess on how that happened. So, and in doing that, the liabilities associated with payroll wouldn't be included in the current payroll system on the new computer, the new version you guys were using. And when the vendor checks were entered in to show the replacement for the checks that were actually written, those liabilities weren't recorded anywhere. So it didn't show that the right amount that was being owed. So I rewrote the payroll, recreated that in your system for you, that generated the liabilities. And then so those were able to be paid, once we determined what that amount was, and Todd did pay those, when we got that correction. And in doing the adjustment, I also adjusted the wage account so that it doesn't look like you, in your wage expenses, that anybody was paid twice or anything like that. I adjusted those so that it is reporting a current, to date amount as it should. In doing that, kind of diving into some of that, I discovered that February's payroll liabilities were not recorded through the correct way in the liability system in QuickBooks as well, and that they hadn't actually been paid either. So sorting that out, I got with Todd sorting that out, and he did go ahead and make that correction and payment also.
That was January and February.
Yeah, so what it appeared happened is that because January wasn't there, it looked like the one that was there, it was for February's, and I think that Todd maybe thought it was January's. And then the payment screen that would be where you go online to make the payment, it looks like he just didn't click through to actually make the payment. But that's been corrected.
Okay.
The only other thing to note in terms of, they're kind of in line with those federal liability payments, you guys refer to them as FICA payments, same thing, is that there is a easier way to record them than what's currently happening, and it's not anything that is a huge issue, but it does just make it so that you can't actually, it's not correctly reporting how you're making the payment, and you're using a check when you don't need to. So it's a minor thing, but it is something to note, that I can, work with the clerk on fixing that in the future. During your bill detail, you guys noted that you did have a balance that was owed on your fourth quarter filing, and I just made a note that anytime that you receive notices, that then there should be a review of that process to make sure that really is owed. I would do as Todd did, I would pay it and then do the review. You don't want to not pay, but I would then do the review afterwards. So that's just a note for record. The similar things seem to be happening at the state for your payroll liabilities as well. And in that one, it looks like you guys received a notice, you paid it, it said you were delinquent, but in reviewing those numbers, I actually don't believe you were delinquent. So it looks at the moment like there's possibly an overpayment to the state. And then my recommendation would also be to start using the online payment system for the state versus paper filing, and that will alleviate some of those discrepancies and miscommunications. What happens sometimes is when you're filing by paper, your check and your filing can get separated. It appears that maybe is what happened. When you go online, it doesn't show that anything has been recorded for that particular quarter, but we have copy of Todd's filing and the check, and it's cleared, and so they did get it. So I would just say again, those things maybe need to be reviewed to make sure that when you're getting notices, sorting out, is that something that you actually owe? Under the state liabilities as well, looking back at some of the filings, the filing and the payment don't match. So maybe reviewing some of that to see why those numbers aren't the same. They should be the same number. So just take a review of what that looks like. Noticed that you guys are paying paychecks at the very beginning of the month, or the beginning of your pay period. It's just a note that that's not a normal practice. Normal practice would be that you pay at the end of a pay period. That would not necessarily change, to make that transition, it wouldn't change any of Ted's filing dates or anything like that. You would just get paid, so for instance, this is May, instead of receiving your May check now, you'd be receiving April's check. So that's more normal practice, is you're paying at the end of a period instead of beginning. Discovered that there are some employees that have multiple roles within the township, and that all of that wage is not being paid in their payroll, that they're being paid for some of their activity in a payroll and some of their activity as a vendor check. And so the problem with that is that they're in that vendor check, they're also not receiving 1099. So there's a portion of payment for some of the employees of the township that's not being recorded for tax purposes. So combining those is what should happen. If there's an employee doing a secondary position, it doesn't matter if it's within their the majority of the position that they're doing. Anything in addition, any wages in addition belong in their payroll. So that would be something to note. There was one employee that had duplicate, a duplicate record, and had been written checks under each name. That's been corrected has been made aware of that, so he's using the correct one going forward. The system won't let you combine them, so the solution to that would be to manually add them together at the end of the year on the W-2, or simply give the person 2 W-2s. It's not a difficult solution, but the system won't let you combine them. It was only one check, so it's not a large problem. You had some employee records that were not calculating specifically state withholdings at all. And so I corrected that, made sure that everybody was set up accurately. You do have some people that prefer to have extra withholdings taken out for federal, and I would just recommend that if that's not recorded on a W-4, that I would have them update their W-4 so that those records were current and accurate for what they want being withheld. With that, your payroll items that are used within the system, I went through and cleaned those up and made that accurate according to each position that the township pays, and then just tied that to the employee record so that is visible. That's it for the findings for what the initial payroll system that you guys had asked me to look into. Do you guys have any questions on that part before I move forward?
No, I mean, I think you covered it pretty well. Anybody else have any questions?
Okay.
How do you move forward?
And so moving on to the proposal that you had also requested. The first 2 items on there are the federal liability payments and the state withholdings that I had mentioned in the findings, and just that those items get reviewed and taken care of. Your chart of accounts, which is just the listing of all of your revenues, expenses, and assets, things like that within the QuickBooks system, doesn't appear to be organized in a way that separates your different funds, and it doesn't mirror the state's uniform code chart. So I would recommend that get updated. Your CDs are all commingled into one account in your system that's never been reconciled, and so what that's showing in your reporting is not accurate, I don't believe. So it would be easier to separate those out into the individual CDs that you guys hold, and then reconcile those on either a quarterly or annual basis, whichever those CDs happen to pay out their interest. Within that too, that chart of accounts also includes your banking and things like that. There's an account in there, a couple accounts in there that have a small balance that, my understanding is they're closed. Like for instance, you had at one point, Honeymoon Heights had a road account, and there's, I think it's maybe like 15 cents or something is hanging out in that account. So just minor cleanups of those types of things. Your vendor list has duplicate names in it, so you might be, we'll just use the road commission for example, and I'm not saying this is in there, but just as an example, there might be a name that is Montcalm County Road Commission, and then it might be Montcalm might be abbreviated Road Commission, and then it might just say Road Commission. And so there's several instances of duplicate names within that list, and the problem that causes is that if you wanna report for a certain vendor, then you have to dive in and say, okay, did everything get written to that same name? If one person's doing it and they know that they're always doing the same name, then it maybe is not a big issue. But if a deputy is stepping in to do any work, then that could cause problems, or you guys are having a transition coming up, that could cause issues too. So I would recommend cleaning that up. And then also, it does not appear that your vendor list identifies who in your system would be 1099. And so I would recommend that be flagged in each of those just for the end of the year reporting to make that more accurate. Same is true for your customer list. There's multiple duplicates in there, so cleaning that up. I found a couple instances where your fire revenue and expenses are being recorded a bit inaccurate, so it's looking like there's duplicates in there. And so that would need to be cleaned up as well, especially going forward to have accurate reporting and what those numbers are. All of those things with the numbers affect your budget to actual report being correct. So currently there's probably some inaccuracies in that report. Your bill detail report, right now is my understanding that it's not being generated within QuickBooks, and anytime you are manually generating a report outside of the software system, it just increases opportunity for error. And it's extra work that, it takes a moment to print a report versus typing something, so it's a time saver as well. And then lastly, there were a couple other checks in 2023 that should have been payroll checks that were written outside of that payroll system as vendor checks. So those absolutely have caused some inaccuracies in the W-2s that you reported. The significance of those amounts, one was more significant than the other, but those should be corrected, and then you can determine whether or not those need to be amended for your filings. So those are that's kind of the overview of some of the key things that I found in the time that I spent. So the proposal, I split it into two sections for you guys. The first section would be correcting all of the items listed except that very last one. So it would be going in and reviewing the liability payments, correcting the withholdings with the state, correcting and resubmitting the filings for the payments that aren't matching the state filings, doing the adjustments to your chart of accounts like I mentioned so they mirror what the state does, reorganizing that so you can see the difference of your different funds, also separating out your CD accounts and making sure that all of the accounts listed in there are reconciled in zero balance if they're old. Consolidating those duplicates that we talked about in both your vendor and customer list, flagging your 1099 vendors, diving into the fire expenses and revenues and making sure those are reporting accurately, then providing the board with an accurate budget budget to actual report for all of your funds, and then, helping the clerk with a memorized bill detail report, so that it's just something that he can print each month. And then if interested, there is, training in there for the clerk as well with some of the QuickBooks items. The second option on it's the top of page 2, I just separated out, diving into those checks that should have been payroll, but were written as vendor in 2023 that, made your W-2s inaccurate, which would then kind of translate into your filings being inaccurate as well. So that option is in there to review and correct, amend if necessary, going back to fiscal year 22-23, so that encompasses those areas. And then tying into Randy's submission of the qualifying statement. I don't know if you wanna speak to that, or,
What I learned about qualifying statements is it's pretty simple form, it just asks a lot of questions, but one of the questions asks, were you more than 30 days late on payroll tax withholding? And were you late more than once, 30 days? I mean, they'll give you once, but I'm not checking that box, yes or no, until we know. I mean, this is getting submitted to the state, and I know we had one for sure. And then there could be others, I guess, it likely is others, but I guess, I've done a fair amount of work on that to try to, go back through pay stubs. So, hopefully that work could, you could, I guess, piggyback off some of that work that I had started and get that second set of eyes on there, so I just make note of that. But yeah, that's, we're not gonna submit that until we know for sure how to answer that question.
and that option 2 would be the work that would need to be done to have a clear answer to that question. Do you guys have any questions on any of that?
They have questions for Blaine? I mean, this is great, Blaine. I mean, laying it all out, what we need, to correct, to do better, so that we can improve our reporting and timeliness. And, payroll is such a detailed animal. I mean, it's gotta be right. And, looking at your pricing, I see, the option 1, which was, a lot of, some corrections with payroll, but the chart of accounts, that definitely needs a scrubbing. I mean, that's probably been there for years and years and years and years and years.
Sarah just actually came and changed all that.
Right, and even she noted that our account numbers were cut off. We only had like the first 5 digits. I mean, the state account numbers are what, like 12 digits long?
They're 3 sections of 3 numbers.
Yeah, so I mean, she even noted that, but, so that's option 1. Option 2, so that, for all of that work in option 1, that was, not including the training, up to 40 hours, at $65 an hour, 2,600. And again, that's not to exceed, but it is based on your actual hours. So if you don't use the full 40, we're only billed the hours that you incurred.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And then we do have some optional, the clerk's training would be an additional $650 up to 10 hours, that's $65 an hour. And then the option 2, which again, that one's pretty important, because was that the one where we need, I guess we could potentially have a W-2 or 2 that needs to be amended. And that we wanna take seriously, because that's people's, tax returns. So, that scope of work up to 25 hours, again, I'm hoping that with the work that I've summarized and done, that we can, come in significantly less than that, but that was, up to 25 hours works out to $1,625. And then your other item on here, in-person and written report itemizing completed tasks within the proposed scope of work and summarization of additional findings and recommendations. You have $325 on that, so what would that be?
So that's basically this, so usually I don't charge to come talk to you or present a proposal. The findings reports to be here and walk you through what I found and what I did, that's what that line item is. So, being that I was here to talk about the proposal anyway, I didn't charge you guys for that for the payroll findings. But being that if you want me to come back and talk through
Okay.
what I did, with another findings report at the end, that's what that line item's for.
So if we went with everything, the total proposed scope of work would be $5,200. Anybody else have any comments or questions, anything?
Yeah, I think that, definitely, if she is coming and doing some things, she needs to come within the public and do what she did today. And if we do hire her to do some of the scope of the work.
Yeah, I think that's been great how you've laid it all out, and I was looking at our budget, I mean, this would be probably in the township board category, and we are showing we're under budget, or we would have enough money if we wanted to do the full 5,200. Again, it comes in less, great, but not to exceed the 5,200. I'm in favor of it, I mean, we need it, it's been, that QuickBooks file has been probably 2010-ish, and when has it ever really had a good scrubbing,
Probably never.
yeah, and,
Another question, I mean, for Todd, if he's saying, Todd want the training for that, or we have to wait for the new person? That's my only question. You know what I mean?
I guess what's your thoughts on the
I don't have a problem with it.
First of all, I don't have any problem with Blaine whatsoever, she's been very helpful so far.
Yes.
As far as training me, I don't know if that's worthwhile. If there's gonna be a new person taking my place.
And that can be, if you wanna go ahead and approve that, we can either delete it if you wanna wait until the new person comes in, maybe they will be knowledgeable and comfortable and won't want it or need it. Or if you approve it, it doesn't, and it never happens, you never get charged either, so, I mean, that's totally up to you guys, but, yeah.
Alright, if there's anybody else, last call, anything? Alright, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the proposal from Trusted Solutions Accounting. Total, not to exceed $5,200. Is there support for that? Motion's been made and supported, is there further discussion?
My only question here, was it approved so much for Brandy the last time, or Blaine the last time? Was there some of that left? I mean, it's not gonna make a difference because she didn't use it all, right?
Yeah, I don't think that, I mean, you have like an hour and
There was an hour and 45 minutes left on that, I think, if you,
technically
I mean, we
if
didn't
you
pay her
want
for it.
No, we
So-
did not.
no, that's
We did
what I
not
mean.
do it.
I didn't charge you
No.
for